So as soon as I had decided on the theme for this Sunday, as many of you already know, or if you're visiting here this morning, we're looking over the next several Sundays, themes that we found through Diana Butler Bass's book called Grounded. Some of you have purchased the book to read on your own. It's subtitled Finding God in the World, a Spiritual Revolution. And so the theme I'm talking about today is her first section on dirt, soil. And when I thought of dirt, besides what's swept under the carpet, this is how my mind works. I can't explain it, but this is how it works. I thought of my favorite childhood book, Harry the Dirty Dog. It's recently celebrated its 50th anniversary. So if you want to kind of remember when you read that to your own children or grandchildren, I have a copy here that you can look through. But I don't know why I always loved Harry the Dirty Dog. Because Harry was the dog that hated to be bathed. He loved everything he could do to get himself dirty. And as the story goes, if you may recall, the one day when he hears the water running in the bathtub, he hightails it out the back door because he knows what that meant. And he spent a whole wonderful day exploring all different options of dirt in his neighborhood, whether it was climbing through a chimney chute or going to the local construction zone or all these wonderful things, met up with some of his own canine pals and had a wonderful time rolling in mud puddles, etc. So apparently Harry the Dirty Dog, the dog that was white with black spots, became a black dog with white spots. So when he got hungry and decided, somehow, I don't think it's volume, it's just some kind of little tweak in my wiring. Okay, we're good. So when he finally gets home and goes into his backyard, crawls under the fence and gets that last layer of dirt and mud on him, his family don't recognize him. And so much to his horror, and he does all the tricks that he normally did, hoping that they'll recognize him, but they don't because he's so filthy dirty. They have a white dog with black spots, not a black dog with white spots. So he gets an idea and he remembers where he had hidden the scrubbing brush for his bath. So he grabs that and hightails it up into the house, into the bathroom, hops in the bathtub, holding the brush in his mouth, saying, "Hey, please bath me." And the family go, "Oh, I think this strange dog wants a bath because our dog Harry never wanted a bath." So they bath him, and of course, lo and behold, the big reveal, and it's in fact their beloved dog Harry. So everyone lives happily ever after. Harry is no longer afraid of a bath, and he's contentedly found his way back home again. Well, why should I be thinking about a story, a childhood story like that, in relation to our current theme today on dirt? Well, it made me realize that in some ways, our church has been kind of the same way about dirt. We haven't looked too well on dirt. A lot of our church and institutional tradition has been that we have to be cleansed or clean in order to be a part of God's creation. There's all kinds of words that we associate with dirt that aren't necessarily good words, you know? There's mudslinging. There's what other words and phrases that come to mind related to dirt that all have kind of a negative connotation to them. We don't really celebrate dirt, much to Ron's chagrin. Monica's. We don't really celebrate dirt. In our biblical tradition, I would even argue maybe not a biblical tradition, sometimes the interpretation of our biblical tradition has been to not think very well about dirt. So in fact, in a lot of early Jewish traditions, if you were to go to the temple, you had to be cleansed before you could go into that temple. Literally had baths outside the temple, and you would be completely immersed and then walk out the other side. They were called mikvahs, and they were for cleansing so that you were clean enough to go into the temple, to the holy place. We think of the image of Moses being asked to remove his sandals because he's standing on holy ground. So our sense of dirt that we've carried forward has not necessarily been a positive one. But in fact, from our Genesis story that we heard read this morning by Sandra, we realized, no, actually, earth is really what we were created out of. God, the Spirit Creator, breathed life into the dirt. And that's what made us and all living creatures of the earth. So earth is actually a good thing. Now, many of us are familiar with that same Genesis passage, and it talks about that the humans will have dominion over the earth, and we took that to mean we are going to overpower, overtake, just grab whatever we need from this earth because it's ours. And that whole sense of ownership of the earth. But I don't think that's what God, our Creator, had in mind. And some of the translations and interpretations of the words used in that passage, actually, it's not so much about dominion over as we are servants or caretakers of that earth. And as you know, in recent times we realize we have not done a very good job of that. How many of you grew up on a farm? Many of you. I grew up in the city. I didn't even know that pickles were cucumbers. Really. I thought they made a mistake on the label. I said, Auntie Karen, the jar here says there's cucumbers in here. It's pickles. Somebody made a mistake. No idea. I grew up in the city. We didn't have a garden. We just bought what we needed out of the grocery store. What can you share with me about your experience of being raised on a farm or working on a farm, of some of the things that are happening today? It's all over the place in terms of our desire to take on new kinds of farming practices that are less harmful to our soil. There's a pushback from the whole industrialization of farming and how, yes, it might yield more for us in the short term, but in the long term, it's depleting our soil resource, and it literally has taken millions of years for the soil to get to the place that it is today, and we are fast damaging that. It's eroding, it's blowing away. We cannot recover as quickly as our demand of it. So can any of you that have been grown up on a farm or have some wisdom to share with a city girl like me, what are, if you could imagine, what are like kind of the top 2 or 3 concerns that you would say within either farming or our soil, or things that we need to be aware of or that we're learning about today that we perhaps hadn't realized before? Anybody willing to share something, some wisdom, some soil wisdom with me? Yes? No? Genetically modified foods, they kind of follow suit. As we deplete our soil, it can't bring as much forward for us, and so we end up having to find other ways to grow food more quickly in mass production, right? Yeah, yeah. Anyone else? Yes? Right. Yeah, a gentleman working in a local grocery store, yes, had a rash come out on his hands from handling all the fruits and vegetables in the vegetable section of the grocery store. So he had to, eventually he retired, but he had to wear heavy gloves to protect his hands from what he was reacting to that is sprayed on all our fruits and vegetables that we're eating every day. Yeah. So our heavy rains, an entire crop lost because the soil couldn't absorb that much water all at once. Is that fair to say? Yeah, yeah. Oh, sorry, I got one back here, Carrie.
This week I received a copy of a thesis from a student in agriculture at Nova Scotia.
Oh, excuse me, Andrew, can I trouble you for a mic, and then it might be easier for people to hear.
The thesis dealt with
right? A lot of a new thesis that was just read, just published, and saying that there's a lot of misunderstanding about our understanding of what the stewardship of the soil. Is it critical of how we've been looking after the soil, or what would you say?
Actually, there's just a lot of misconceptions.
Misconceptions?
Testing soil.
Okay. Okay. All right. I had one. Yes, Ross.
Less plowing and more
Oh.
minimum tillage.
Yeah, less plowing and more minimum tillage. Yeah. When my husband and I first moved into this area, we had lived down in Oakville, and we bought a farm just south of Rockwood, because my husband always dreamed about, he kind of grew up in an agricultural area. He wasn't raised on a farm, but he grew up in that kind of agricultural area just outside of London. And he always dreamed that it would be lovely to live on a larger piece of property. And we knew nothing about farming, but we knew enough to say this had been a farm that had been farmed up until about the 70s, but then most of the pastures had gone fallow. But it was an old century farm, so we had all the stone fencing and what have you around it. And so he invited some of the local farmers in to say, I mean, I can't manage this land. I don't know, I don't have the expertise to do it, but I'm willing to donate the land to any of you if you would like to grow crops and be part of that organization that donated some of the plantings and what have you to, what is it, the World Food Grains. So a couple of the local farmers came, and one of them was a gentleman who had a farm that was like 1,500 acres. And he walked in and looked at ours and says, well, there's no way I can even drive my tractor into one of your pastures. Like, I'd just get one end to the other, and I couldn't turn around. And so we ended up actually having a forestry group come in and plant several acres of trees, nut trees and a variety of things. But I realize now, A, I wish we still owned that farm. But B, we kind of stumbled upon some of the issues that are occurring now, that we're actually, the trend now is moving away from those mass production farms back into those smaller mixed farms. And there's a wonderful video actually that I watched called Sustainable, and it really had a wonderful exploration of what the possibilities could be to do that. So here we've kind of come from our tradition in the church of, you know, not necessarily, if anything, as we've matured and become industrialized and become experienced and apparently wise, we've moved, there was a status to move away from the farm into the city. You know, that's where all the money was to be made. That's where you could really get the most out of life, etc. You know the story. And yet we're recognizing now, particularly our young people, they're moving out of the cities. They're moving back into the country. My husband's youngest daughter actually just sold her house here in Guelph and bought a farm just outside of Westport, just north of Kingston. And her dream is to grow organic vegetables on this farm and to live off the land. And it's so interesting that in this video that I was watching, this documentary, they were talking about these local farmers who have had these century farms and how they're starting to reinvent how they produce food on their farms and the practices that they use. And they're doing it in partnership with chefs in the cities. And so they're providing all of the local food and produce for these chefs who themselves are saying, I want this kind of food that is not genetically modified or covered in pesticides or all these other things. So there's this whole kind of movement that's happening. And you and I, we've all been aware of this. We try to go to our local market, or we are supporting our West End harvest market, etc. We're growing, many of you are still growing vegetables in your own gardens. So this is not new to you. But I find it so interesting that I hadn't made the connection to us as a people of faith recapturing a sense of the earth and our relationship to it. And how, as being faithful followers of Christ, that part of our mandate really is to reconnect with the earth, to recognize that we ourselves are stewards in the best sense of the word. Our creed says that we will live with respect in creation. Who knew that this church that supposedly is dying and becoming irrelevant could be the best community to connect with people to help others understand that relationship with the earth and with creation? And that is part of our calling, I see now. Some of our sister churches are offering community gardens. They're seeing this connection between our faith and how we produce our food and the foods that we buy, and how we care even for our own gardens in our own backyard. So I want to share with you something that I came across in some reading. And if you want to explore this subject further, I certainly would point you to Diana Butler Bass and her book Grounded, but also another writer, Wendell Berry. Some of you may be familiar with some of his writings. And this gentleman here, Reagan Sutterfield, wrote also about this connection between our faith and the earth, and how we really have a role to play right now in lifting up this sense of we have to be good stewards of our earth, and all the things that we could try to do to increase our, not only our participation in bringing about an awareness of this, but how we extend that to our families, to our communities. And who know that, when you're having a meal with your daughters or son-in-laws or sons and daughters-in-laws or grandchildren, that you talk about this because this is a very important subject for our young people today. And that could be a faith connection for them to realize that, well, when that subject comes up about organic foods or GMOs and all of this, say, well, we were just hearing about that in church on Sunday. We were talking about that very subject because that's part of us being faithful followers. I just want to share this little excerpt from this gentleman who wrote this book. His name is Reagan Sutterfield. And he calls this little paragraph here, "The Soil Saves." And I just thought you might find it interesting to hear how he describes this. He's using the metaphor that we're familiar with from our scriptures about Babylon. The experience of the Israelites being in captivity, being away from their homes, away from everything that they had been familiar with. And literally generations have gone by that they've been out of Jerusalem. They have not been able to live according to their ways of faith. And so the dream has always been for that people to return to Jerusalem, to that time when they could follow their faith and their way of life and be in right relationship with God and with one another. And he uses that image to suggest that we are today ourselves living in a Babylon. We're living in a culture that is not in keeping with our faith and our traditions, and how we yearn to return back to that sense of Jerusalem, in a sense to that Garden of Eden, if you will. So I'm going to share some of his words here. He says, "We now live in Babylon, a culture of captivity, and most of us have become comfortable with life here. Food is available everywhere. Clean water runs from our faucets. We can easily drive from one place to another. The economy, for whatever its momentary woes, still provides for the most part. To live here comfortably, we only have to bow our heads and pay homage with our money to the manufactured abundance that makes up this kingdom. We have to preserve our ignorance and make sure that no one violates the sacred flow of oil or electricity that we simply cannot live without. What happens outside of Babylon is of no concern as long as Babylon is filled with abundance, wealth, and health. But just as the Israelites were called out of their comfortable lives of accommodation, we too, as a people of faith, must leave this false world of manufactured abundance to live in the promised land. It is a land that might not seem so wonderful at first. Our hands and feet and bodies are soft from lives lived in illusion. But once we've learned to live as human beings once more, to use our muscles, our minds, our hearts to engage with the humus, the earth from which we were formed, there will be no longing for Babylon, only for the full restoration of Jerusalem. Salvation should surely be the business of the church. But our understanding of salvation has been formed by a desire to continue our lives in service to the idols of empire. We have come to see salvation not as a radical call to live fully into reality, but rather a matter of the spiritual. Forget the salvation of the soul. Let's preach God's salvation of human beings. It's pretty radical thinking. Some different way of looking at that. But I realize, in a sense, that so often in our faith and in our understanding of our faith, we think about this new Jerusalem or the kingdom to come. And I think so many of our theologians today are realizing there's a kingdom on earth now that we need to save. There's a sense in which creation is calling out to be honored and respected the way it was entrusted to us as creatures of that creation. And so it may seem like, well, how can I stop those industrial farming practices? And how can I possibly go up against these big food and industries and change? Well, we can change in terms of what we buy in our store. We can change things in terms of the habits that we keep at home. There are many ways in which the things that we do each and every day can make an impact, and what we talk about and what we promote ourselves. So all I can say is, from a city girl who really knew nothing about the earth and gardening, I want to learn. I want to learn how to serve this earth that has been entrusted to us. I want to preserve this kingdom that God imagined for us to live in, one in which there was abundance for all. Not because we all had more than we needed, but each of us had enough. And whatever practices or things that I can faithfully do to bring that about, I'm willing to do. And I hope that you're willing to help me figure that out. Maybe it starts with a garden in our own property here. Or maybe it's sharing some of the foods or the learnings. We have our Fun with Food camp coming up. And part of the business of that is that we want to teach our children what it is to grow their own food and where it comes from and how to care for it and how to cook it and what is the best way of getting the healthiest choices into our own bodies to bring about our own health. It's a big subject. I've just started to touch on the surface of it. But I hope that together it's a subject that we might continue to explore as being a people of faith who, within our own creed, have promised to live with respect in creation. Our church has a great calling to do what we can to promote this in our own homes and within our families and in our community. And that's the best place to start. We can't change the world. Perhaps we can change some of the simple things that we do in our own daily living, and in that way be more faithful. So please, over coffee or the next few weeks, invite me to a tour of your garden or your vegetable garden, or let's share some common faithful practices that we do in ways that will honor our earth. Amen.